Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Karmic. Hope you have looked at the other episodes. If not, do subscribe and have a listen to some really fabulous talks. But today, the promise is to bring in a wonderfully opinionated, but somebody who's very well attuned to the NHS, has views which you may or may not agree with. I've always differed with him on certain occasions, agreed with him on certain, but clearly no debating the fact that he's passionate about the NHS. And the person we are talking about is Roy Lilley, who I'll bring in a very short bit. But I think a lot of things we talk about is things which intrigue people, frustrate people, the NHS, workforce, where are we going? Is there any hope? Views on leadership. So do have a listen and see what you think. So in a few minutes' time, or sorry, in a bit, not a few minutes, in a few moments, we will move on to Roy Lilley. Well, hello everybody. As promised, here we are with the man himself, Roy Lilley. Don't want to say too much about Roy, simply because if you just Google Roy Lilley, you will probably know enough about him. But I have always been an avid fan of Roy's blogs, always, because I think he's probably the only person I first saw when I was anywhere near a leadership role who do those graphs and said, "This is the gap, guys, that's coming." And I remember joining NHS England, and I've been there nearly for a decade, and not a single day has anybody actually said, though everybody knows that's the truth. So that's something I've always loved about Roy. No mincing of words. Yeah, you may not like what he says, but he says it. And you may not agree with it, and I think that's always good. And I think that's what I like, is that in a democracy, healthy democracy, that's what it should be. You should have the ability to say what do you think is not right and not wrong. And so without further ado, Roy, tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into the sort of meat of it.
Pastor, well, good afternoon, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. What is there to say? There's not much to say, really. I got involved with the NHS when I was in my mid 20s,
Hmm.
and
So only
80
10
this
years,
year.
only a decade ago then, Roy?
Yeah, I'm 80 this year, so take 25 from 80, and you'll see how long I've been involved. I became a member of a district health authority. And it was amazing, really, because I remember going to my first meeting. I remember it like it was yesterday. I went into this meeting, this big glass room with an enormous table, and there were shed loads of people sitting around the table with great piles of paper. And they'd sent me the agenda before and all the backup papers, and it was an old-fashioned telephone
Mm,
book,
mm,
great big thick thing. And of course, I didn't read any of it by the time I got there because it was all written in code with an acronyms and things. I
yeah.
didn't understand any of it. But it didn't take long before I got completely seduced by what they were trying to do.
Mm,
And around the table, this was the district health authority, and around the table we had the police force, we had the fire brigade, we had the ambulance service, we had the teachers, the voluntary sector, the people representing the hospitals, people representing GPs, people representing the community. Everybody was around that table. And I thought, what a brilliant idea it is that we can all sort of have a bit of a say on how these very important services are run. And so that was my first impression. Was I kind of staggered out of there punch drunk with it all. And the finances were wacky, I thought, and the way they did the finances. And of course, this was in the days before Excel spreadsheets. We had a graph paper that was sellotaped together, and we kind of unfolded it like it was wallpaper, with the numbers. It was impossible to read. I mean, allocations were, we get this at the beginning of the year, divide it by 12, and that's how much a month we're going to
oh, yeah.
spend. We just doled it out like that. So that was really how it started. I became the vice chairman and finally the chairman of the district health authority. Then I got involved with the being the trust movement, and became a first wave trust chairman. There were just 50 of us who were the first wave in the country. We were appointed, I was appointed by Mrs. Thatcher, and we were all appointed, really. They were political appointments, no question about it. I mean, they were all uh, business leaders. There were Jeremy Always from the Reed organization,
Mm,
um, Phil Phil Hunt, the carpet guy who ran Guy's Hospital, I mean, they were all prominent business people. I got involved in that. Then I got involved in policy, and then I went to Nottingham University with Eric Keynes and set up the Health Services Management School. Then came down from there and was a visiting fellow at Imperial for a while. And then I got into writing and broadcasting and policy advice. And here we are. So there
Well,
you are. That's a
I mean,
potted.
yeah, well, I mean, do you know what? Why I asked you the question? Because, you go in circles and people always, people, NHS always in trouble. Don't worry about it. It will sort of go around. Does it have a different feel to it? I mean, I think the broader question, what ails the NHS? But it seems like all of a bit of a static mess to me at the moment. Do you feel like with your experience, this is new, or is this sort of one sort of a cycle that people just go around? What's your view about it?
I don't want to sort of this to sound like an arrogant reply, like I know everything, but because I don't. But there's very little new, really,
Mm,
even this time round. If you look at what Wes Streeting is trying to do, they're going to beef up Foundation Trust. Well, Alan Milburn did that
mm,
back in 2000. A lot of what is happening now is really the legacy of Alan Milburn. It was all introduced in 2008, nine. They came into power in the late 90s. Milburn came in, introduced a whole load of stuff, and to be honest, most of it had gone by
mm,
2011 because
mm,
he tried to introduce a market, and we realised it costs a fortune and didn't improve quality. He tried to give foundation trusts a freedom. That I thought was a good idea at the time. I'm not sure I do now, but of course it was impossible because they're networked into a very complicated system. I mean, most of the stuff that he tried to introduce, the Labour Party dropped, and then Simon Stevens came along. Then, of course, we had the chaos of the Lansley reforms, and now we've got Streeting, really, who's making a. I mean, people often ask me, who's the worst Secretary of State we've had? And I always start by saying, well, who's the best we've had? And
yeah.
Alan Johnson was the best.
Mhm,
Alan Johnson, Labour, of course, an ex-postman, a very ordinary bloke who got his education through the Workers' Education Union. That's how he got his degree. And my uncle got a PhD through the Workers' Education Union, working in the post office. And Alan worked in the post office. So I think kind of a bit of familiar territory with him on that.
mm,
And when he arrived, he said, I don't know anything about the NHS. How can I help?
yeah.
And wow, here's a guy who's not saying I've arrived and I know better than anybody in the NHS.
Mm,
How can I? So he was one of the best, I think. Um, then of course Lansley came along, and I thought nobody could make more of a mess of the NHS than Lansley. But now we got Streeting, and the difference between Streeting and Lansley is Lansley had a plan to mess it up. Streeting hasn't got the first idea what he's doing, and he's messing it up. I mean, he's turned up one Monday morning and said, you're going to have to sell, Jim Mackey said on his behalf, you're going to have to sack half your people by Christmas, but nobody knows which half. We've had trusts now. I read over the weekend that one of the trusts down in the West Country is putting 500 people on notice of redundancy, including clinicians and nurses and doctors. I mean, really? What he's doing is causing enormous damage, a lot of chaos, and there's no real understanding of what he wants to get out at the end of it. What is he trying to do? Is he trying to balance the books? Okay, tell us. Or is he trying to do waiting list? Okay, get on with it, because he's not. Or is he just kind of messing about? I don't know what he's doing. So
Do you know what is
uh,
intriguing for me is that because, you know, it's a lot of it is tied in with elections because I think I remember talking to you about this because many years ago I said, oh, Roy, why can't we get rid of the political interference and just do it? And you educated me really nicely and go like, well, it's because it's such a calling card for the elections itself, and you can't dissociate a public funded system from politics. So with that in mind, call it naive. For me, they're unlikely to win the battle on immigration in the elections. So has to be their biggest chip card in play. You'd have thought they've sunk all the eggs in that basket.
it absolutely does. And if you cast your mind back to the last election, the top of the pops for as far as the public were concerned was waiting lists, NHS waiting lists.
Yeah.
They've dropped now. Migration's, I think,
Yeah. High up.
taken
Yeah.
over, and the
Mm,
everybody's worried about the economy. But
mm,
Streeting was elected to sort out waiting lists,
mm,
and we need a whole national effort on waiting lists. I
Mm,
mean, I think it can be done. We need to disaggregate the list. We need to look at where the lists are the longest, what the issues are, why they're the longest, where deprivation fits in, break the whole thing down, focus our efforts on just doing waiting lists. And I think the NHS would roll up its sleeves and do it because it
mm,
does that kind of thing.
mm.
But as far as the politics of it was concerned, I mean, the one thing I thought might have come out of the Lansley reforms was NHS England being invented, making it an arm's length body.
Yeah.
The idea was the Department of Health said,
Mm,
here's 6 things to do. We want you to do it this year. That was called the mandate, and you get on and do it. Well, of course, it didn't work because every Wednesday in the House of Commons, there's health questions. Secretary of State has to stand up and answer the fact that the honourable member from Little Muggleswaite, constituent Mrs. Williams, has been waiting, 5 years for a hip operation, and when's she going to get a new hip?
mm.
And so you just can't really
Dissociate.
separate the operational side of the NHS. Politicians have to get involved. It's the extent to which they get involved and what they get involved with that I think is the marker of how good a Secretary of State they are.
So tell us, I mean, is there any hope, or are we sort of pretty cooked at the moment? Because there seems to be two schools of thought. One is, I mean, I must say this, I speak to many, many clinicians and many sort of in the leadership positions, and everybody seems to have a very not sure what's going to happen next. And do you have friends who you know in the business who you can put a phone call to if you're ill? Seems to be a lot of sort of response you get back. Um, what do you see? I mean, let's say you said you're nearly 80 now, and let's say you have turned into a Gandalf-like figure and you're 90 and you're sitting there with your slippers and pipe. The NHS still around, or are we very much like in a insurance-based system? Everything's changed. How do you see it?
I think the NHS will still be there. And that's not because I'm sort of romanticized about it or in love with it or it's my religion, as Lawson once said. No, I think it will be. I think it will be because it is the most practical system to provide healthcare. I mean, people ask me a lot, should we change the way it's funded? So, if you've got insurance or whatever. And I always give them the same answer. I say, look, you can take your insurance premiums out of your left-hand pocket, you can take your taxation out of your right-hand pocket, but it's still your trousers. You
Yeah.
still have to pay. And what's the cheapest way of collecting taxes or collecting money for us? It's called taxes. What's the cheapest way of distributing it? It's called allocations. And so I think it will survive. And when people, when I travel abroad and people ask me about the NHS or I speak about the NHS, the one thing they're always envious of, it's not our outcomes or whatever, it's the system.
Yeah.
They love the system, and we're lucky to have it because after the war, the then Labour government decided that they would nationalise effectively the system that was there.
Mm,
And I was born before the NHS, and I know the impact that that had on working people. It took off their shoulders the worry of maternity and illness and accident and disease, and they didn't have to worry about it anymore. And that was a huge change. And of course, after the war in Europe,
mm,
the infrastructures didn't exist in most of it, and so they went into they went into their healthcare systems rather differently. Most of them are really socialized systems. They are still based on
yeah.
consumer contributions, although there's some top up and what have you. But a lot of them are now moving to the system that we've got. So our system, I think, will be the same. I think we dropped in a lot of international benchmarks. I mean, the Commonwealth Institute,
Mm,
the American think tank that does its biennial
mm,
assessment of
mm.
healthcare systems, we were top or in the top two for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and then we dropped. We've not recovered really after COVID. But that doesn't mean to say we can't get back there. And I think the fact that we've got universities tied as closely as they are to hospitals, that we've got the training system that we've got. I mean, the way we train doctors and nurses is I hate to say it, but it is the envy of the world. That's why we get so many overseas
Yeah.
doctors wanting to come and train here. And so I think we've got a lot going for us. What we need now, in my view, is we need to be able to sort of stop, catch our breath, do what's important, and frankly, screwing up NHS England and what have you, that isn't really important. What's important is we've got to focus on getting the staff back on their front foot, give them back their confidence that they are working in a great system,
Mm.
and let them get on and sort the waiting list down. Once the waiting lists start to come down, I think you'll see morale start to go up
Yeah.
because
So
I think
can
people
I ask
know
you?
they're working in a hassled system.
Yeah, so can I ask you something? Do you think we focus too much on shiny things rather than actual? Because if you ask anybody, I mean, those who are non-clinicians in my family, they go, "Do you know what, Partha? I just want to see a GP on time. I worry that if I go to A&E, I'll wait 4 hours. I'm getting older. If I get a cancer, I want somebody to pick it up quickly and see me." Seems to be these are the base. Do you think if they've really focused on those three or four things, the public would be like, "Do you know what? That's good enough," rather than we seem to be diverting ourselves into many, many other things.
I think that's very tempting. And I'm inclined to agree,
Hmm.
but there's a bit more in me that says, the way that demand is going
Yeah.
and the way that costs are going,
Hmm.
we have to do something that's loosely described as productivity. Now, you say productivity to a nurse who's
Hmm.
just come off a night shift,
Yeah.
and you're likely to get a punch in the face.
Yeah.
Or you'd say that to a doctor, about your productivity, and
Mm.
they'll take their stethoscope and wind it around your neck and strangle you, and quite
Mm.
rightly so,
Mm.
because it's not about perspiration.
Person.
But the productivity, the opportunities now to improve productivity, like for example AI, which I know is terrifying a lot
Yeah.
of people, and I know it's disputed. I mean, if you look at image identification now for cancers, for example, Royal College of Radiographers are saying, well, if, but, no, maybe, and
Mm.
blah blah. But we know
It's coming.
that's the way that
It's coming.
technology is going to go that way. And I always think technology and all this kind of stuff is like going for the first time into a nightclub where the lights are flashing and the music's thumping, and the only way to get on in there is to get in and dance.
Yeah.
And it's the same with technology. You've got
Yeah.
to get in there and dance.
Do you know what? It's fascinating you say that because my clinical life has transformed. Technology in our world has made my clinical life so much better. That's a fact, right? It's just transformed what I did 10 years ago, where everybody's very automated using the sensors. So I agree to that. I think sometimes our reluctance to adopt something new stops that sort of progress, which brings me nicely because you touched upon productivity. The biggest mess to me, again from an outside point of view, in that sense, is seems to be our inability to make any head or tail of our workforce. It seems to be just let's just because I'll give you one example, which I was talking in our world, right? So people have said, "Oh my God, we've got so many doctors," and then we've got an organization running still exams for any international doctor to come along when we can't give. It seems quite unthinkable that they're not joined up. That you are the pipeline's jammed, so our approach seems to be throw more people in the pipeline, which I don't quite understand. I mean, do you think we just lack the nous or the technical expertise to do workforce properly?
Yeah, I think we've got caught in a very difficult logjam at the moment. Generally speaking, there's a shortage of everybody.
Yeah,
So, you just keep recruiting and hope that the machine,
yeah,
churns out
yeah,
enough people in the
yeah,
end. I think what's happened now, part of it's to do with migration and people's attitude to migration.
yeah,
Part of it's due to the fact the government hasn't got the money to pay for the placements in hospitals.
yeah.
And I think that needs looking at because quite often hospitals take the money for placements and use it to do hip operations with. So,
Yes.
we know how all that works. So I think we need we need to think again about how we fund placements. Do we even fund placements? Because actually, doctors contribute, even junior doctors,
Mm.
student, just that they all contribute. The better they get, the more they contribute. But everybody contributes. So if you start to discount the contribution they make as just being there, then I think you could recalibrate how we fund a lot of that. But as far as the rest of the sort of manpower piece is concerned, you can't plan workforce until you know what the work is going to be. And we're in this very difficult position now where we're not really sure what the work is going to be. And, I'm going to say something now which I know has exercised you because I follow you on social media, and I know it's exercised a lot of other doctors, and rightly so. If I was a doctor, I
Mm.
would be just as hacked off.
Mm.
But we will see a change in what doctors do.
Yeah.
And that will be contributed to by what we now call AI. It isn't really, it's machine learning, but what we'll call AI, just for the sort of shorthand of it. And decision support will start to become a huge
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Actual decisions will become a huge thing. Administration will be in the bin with the lamplighters, and the chimney sweeps. We just won't do that. We all come in with a barcode zap, and we'll
Yeah.
be barcoded through the system, a bit like Amazon use
Yeah.
barcodes.
Yeah.
So all of that will go. So what does that mean for the professions? Well, you talk to architects now, and they're not designing buildings anymore. Machines are doing it, and they're just coloring it in. If you look at
Mm.
that's not quite true, but you
Yeah.
get at
Yeah.
the
No.
top end,
Yeah.
Norman Foster is still doing stuff,
Mm.
but routine architecture for your extension at the back of your house. No.
Mm. Mm.
If you look at what's happening legally, you get paralegals now and AI
Mm.
that's changing the whole approach to the
Mm.
legal profession.
Mm.
What is going to happen to doctors? Well, at, at the worst end, as some people will see it, we will have de-skilled
Yeah.
doctors
Yeah.
and supported them with AI, which will in time prove itself. And I think people will want those decisions made based on all of that huge.
I mean, they already
Uh,
are. They come to your
yeah,
clinic having done all their research, done been on Gemini, everything, done they've gone through they already have some ideas as to what they might have. Patient comes to
yeah.
clinic already with that.
Yes. So we will see. I regret saying this, but it costs 430 odd thousand pounds to train a doctor to become a consultant, plus all the debt that the
Hmm.
individual
Hmm.
incurs. You're probably looking at, I don't know, three-quarters of a million
Yeah.
pounds, I should
Yeah.
think.
Mm.
To get to the real high end with all these exams. I mean, why Royal Colleges charge what they do for exams is another debate for another day.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of the Royal Colleges. But I do think we have to get on the dance floor. We have to dance because otherwise you'll just be blinded by the light and deafened by the music. We have to be dancing. We have to understand what this means. Now, until we can define what work is, and
Hmm.
that's the bit I'm talking about, you can't define who's going to do it.
Who's do what?
So
Yeah. No,
that's where we
I
go wrong.
agree. I think the whole debate has been caught up in is this a genuine effort to flood the market and drop the price, drop the costs and everything, or is it just because we just don't have any fundamental knowledge of workforce, which is why as you said, it's a bit like, let's just see if the machine can pick it up. We just got to get lots of
Yeah.
people.
I,
So
I think it's cock up, really,
yeah, yeah,
more
yeah.
than conspiracy
No,
this
I
time
agree.
around, particularly after COVID, because COVID screwed everything up,
Yeah,
and there's a backlog in everything
yeah, yeah,
now
yeah,
with COVID. So
yeah,
I think we'll get through this period,
yeah,
and people rightly complain about the opportunities for doctors, and I agree that needs sorting out. But I think in the longer run, we're going to have a serious conversation with ourselves to figure out what this looks like. And I think that there will always be room for people with compassion and care, and there will always be room for very bright people.
yeah.
But in the middle ground, I can't see
A
that the
lot of
current structures will stay.
I agree. I agree. And I think a lot of machine learning will come into place too. I mean, I'll give you one example. I mean, I was in clinic this morning and I'm sitting there thinking, there's so much stuff I'm doing which I don't need to do. Why isn't this automatically done? While I'm
Yeah,
sitting there going, somebody's emailed me, one of my patients saying, is my letter done yet? And the letter that I've dictated is gone somewhere. And you're going like, why is it not done and gone? How
yeah,
is this possible in
yeah.
2025? And a
We
poor,
need to
poor,
fix all that admin. Fix
absolutely.
all that.
And the
Yes, I
time it
mean,
wastes for me.
yeah.
It's
Well, I write an e-letter that goes out,
yeah,
whenever I've got something to
yeah.
say. And tomorrow I'm writing about that. There was an announcement at the weekend about aggregating AI so that everything is put in one place and we can
Mm,
all tap into
mm,
it, which is a great idea. But
yeah.
when you actually deconstruct it, it's an impossible task.
Yes.
And they're going to try and do it by 2027, which they won't
Won't
do.
be able
And
to.
they've only got 6 million, and it's not enough money. I mean, we're just not taking that stuff seriously. Well, I
Yes.
think we need to pick one or two things that would really make a difference, like having a blitz on admin. That would make a huge difference. And I think, something as simple as a blitz on how you log in on the ward
Oh
would
God,
make
yes.
a big difference,
God,
which is
yes.
And there is a piece of software that some hospitals get to help with login. But I mean, and then, what if you're going to have sophisticated decision support, how does, you know, Dr. Partha Carr at 3 o'clock in the morning at the Little Muggles Weight Foundation Trust Hospital in the middle of God knows where
Hmm.
access on his phone some AI support? How is that? Until we fix that, to figure that out, we can't decide how many Dr. Cars we want.
Okay, right. Two small questions at the end to wrap up. Thank you very much, as ever, for you. One thing. First thing, you have a magic wand. You are in charge. What would you want to do right now for the population if you had a magic wand?
Yeah, I'd do two things. I'd fix social care
Hmm.
because I think that would have an immediate effect
Yeah.
on flow through the hospitals.
Yeah.
If you can improve flow through the hospital, then you can stop worrying about getting waiting lists done because you've got the headroom to get on and do stuff.
Hmm.
So I would fix social care. That, of course, is not in the government's on the list of things to do until the next
Yeah.
after the
Well.
next election.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think we can wait that long.
Hmm.
And secondly, I'd have a real go at investing in the community because if you look at who are the most frequent users of the NHS, it's
Yeah.
the over 65s
Yeah.
and it's the under nines. Both of those are in the territory of health visitors and community services. And we don't have enough of either, and we don't have the infrastructure.
Hmm.
So I think I would invest in those two areas. So those are the two. So I know you wanted one, but those are the two things I do.
But do you know what is ironic before I ask you a final question? It sounds so simple and it makes complete sense, yet nobody does it, which is just the most bizarre thing because I read your pieces and as I said, I don't agree with all of them, but I go like, well, that sounds sensible. Why isn't anybody doing any of that? So, and I've been a decade within sort of like central quarters, if that makes sense. So,
Well, let me answer the question. It's because the secondary care consumes so much of the money,
yeah.
not because they waste it, because they need it.
Mm,
So my view is, and this is not without controversy, I would vertically integrate primary and community care into hospitals.
mm, okay.
Not because I want to stop partnerships. So if
Mm,
people want to carry on with that,
mm,
that's fine. But I would vertically integrate them, taking off their shoulders the worry and the cost of their back office and their middle office. I would make the connections between a GP and you, like a diabetic consultant.
yeah.
I would make that. I would just do away with the expression primary care and secondary
Oh, yeah.
care and just call it care. Because you're as much part of the primary care
Yeah.
team as the primary care team are part of you. So diabetes services will be run without that
Seamless. Yeah.
boundary. So, I mean, that's what I do. I mean, I know a lot of people think that GPs are sacrosanct, and listen, as gatekeepers, they're hugely valuable. But I think that by instead of having a vertical integration, I'd sort of have a horizontal system. And I think that would make a big difference. I know that wasn't a question you asked me,
No,
but
no, but
that's your bonus. That's
yeah,
your
no,
bonus for
a bonus.
mine.
Absolutely, absolutely. As one of my very good friends said, the word community diabetology is a tautology.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
diabetologist is you're a diabetologist for the system, not for the community or the hospital. These are all artificial divides, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
Last question to you, Roy.
I'm dreading
Advice.
this. What is it going to be?
No, advice to upcoming people who want to do leadership, because I think I'm in the very business of saying to people, no, you should step up to the leadership rather than criticize from the sidelines. I think younger group of people need to step up. What would your advice to them be in the present?
Three things for leaders. Leaders are visible, have a vision, and share it often. That's the first thing. Leaders are visible, have a vision, and share it often. You can't lead anything sitting behind a desk.
Yeah.
Secondly, leaders always hire people who are better than them.
Hmm.
Leaders always hire people who are better than them. And lastly, leaders create the time and place for good people to do great things.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you, Roy. And for those of you here, if you notice the thing behind Roy, correct me, Roy, but that's from your own coloring painting collection. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah, it's one of mine. Yes.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It is beautiful. For those who are not aware, Roy does those, post those as well. So, Roy, as ever, real big thank you. We met, I don't know how many years ago when you wrote about me, sometime when I was talking to lots of diabetes nurses, many, many years ago. That's only
Yeah.
15 years ago. So
I
we've always
did. You
been,
swung onto the stage, glamorous, and all the nurses went, "Oh, there he is!" And you
those
spoke
days
to
are
them
well
like a
past, my
god.
friend, well past.
It was no, you were terrific, and I'm sure you still are. And I value this opportunity, and thank you
Oh
very
no,
much.
I really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and we wish you all goodbye. Thank you very much.
Goodbye now.
So there we have it, a conversation with Roy Lilley and some interesting points, some pointers for. I love the bit about the leadership bit. So hopefully those who listen take that into account, see what you feel. And of course, do drop your views as to whether you feel that there's hope and chance about going forwards, what's happening with the NHS. If you agree or disagree with Roy's views, click subscribe, listen to the other podcasts on or vlogs. Always good fun. So thank you again for listening this week, and we shall catch up again. We've got some great, great speakers and great guests lined up, so it should all be fun going forwards as well. So till then, thank you and goodbye.